Let's go to the Prime Minister.
Extraordinary events that we could have ever witnessed. The pandemic, the global recession that it caused. Australia during these times has faced our greatest challenge indeed since the Great Depression and the Second World War. In response to that, our government, through the single largest economic intervention that any other government has undertaken in this country, together with the Treasurer, the then Finance Minister, the Cabinet, put in place JobKeeper, saved 700,000 jobs, put in place the cash flow boost, ensured we retained the apprentices, provided the tax incentive for businesses to invest. We did all of that to ensure that the Australian economy would come through this pandemic and, more importantly, on the other side, would be able to excel and to be able to grow. And the result of those policies has been an economy that has outperformed the advanced economies of the world, both in terms of employment and economic growth. The settings that we put in place to provide this support to get the Australian economy through were indeed extraordinary and unprecedented. But the Australian government was not the only agency who was taking such action. One of the hallmarks of the success of coming through the pandemic was that government policy was aligned with the policy decisions of the Reserve Bank. And indeed, the Governor of the Reserve Bank and Deputy Governor, together with the Treasurer and I, would speak regularly about our responses to the pandemic. And the responses of the Reserve Bank supported what we were doing. And vice versa, our responses worked to support what the Reserve Bank was doing. And as a result, here we are today, an economy that is coming out of this pandemic stronger than most of the advanced economies in the world today. And so it is today that the Reserve Bank has made a very important statement about where we are now in our journey out of this pandemic. And I'll use their words exactly. They speak today that the extraordinary support that was put in place to help the Australian economy during the pandemic, that it is appropriate to start the process of normalising monetary conditions. They refer to the unemployment rate declining now to around 3.5% by early 2023, the lowest rate of unemployment in almost 50 years. They refer to economic growth in Australia also remaining positive, with Australian GDP to grow by 4.25% over the balance of this year. And importantly, they say that household and business balance sheets are generally in good shape. They do refer, as we've remarked already over the course of the past week, that inflation has picked up significantly and more than expected. As I recounted to you this morning and yesterday, the International Monetary Fund, just 12 months ago, was estimating that global inflation would be running at 3.2%. They revised that to 7.4% globally. In that same report, they upgraded Australia's economic growth forecasts while downgrading global growth forecasts. The Reserve Bank Governor says that the rise in inflation is largely reflecting global factors. Importantly, he states that wages growth has been picking up, which I know from our discussions with the Governor and the Treasurers, that this has been an important sign the Reserve Bank has been looking for. So they conclude, given both the progress towards full employment and the evidence on prices and wages, some withdrawal of the extraordinary monetary support provided through the pandemic is appropriate. Australians have been preparing for this, and as a result, the bank has decided to increase the catch rate by 25 basis points. Australians have been preparing for this for some time. Throughout the course of the pandemic, we have seen them double their buffers on their mortgages. And we have seen them move from variable rates to fixed rates. double the proportion on fixed rates. But importantly, we've also seen them strengthen their own balance sheets in preparation for what they always knew would not be the continuation of extraordinarily low rates from the Reserve Bank. That was not something that Australians reasonably thought would go on forever, and the Reserve Bank have made that very clear today in saying that they were extraordinary cash rate settings for an economy such as Australia. But the government, our government, has been preparing for this also. We know that cost of living relief was necessary in the budget. We knew about the rising prices that were coming, particularly because of the single largest energy shock we've seen around the globe since the 1970s. And we knew that that would have an impact on Australians getting back up on their feet. And so as a result of the significant turnaround, as a result of our economic plan in this year's budget, we were able to provide that cost of living relief, to provide that shield, as we've provided that shield across this pandemic to Australians and Australian businesses that have kept them in jobs, that have kept their businesses open, that have protected their incomes and ensured that Australians can come through far more strongly than so many other countries around the world. Now I know Australians would be saying, well, what's happening in the UK, in the United States and in Canada and Germany and France, what good is that to me if my prices are going up? Well, what that shield has done has ensured that what others are experiencing in other countries has not happened to the same extent here. Those 8.5% interest rates, 8.5% inflation rates in the United States could have been here. Those almost 7% inflation rates in New Zealand could have been here. All of those pressures that have had those more serious impacts in other countries, just like the death rates from COVID that were overseas, all could have happened here. The shield that we have put in place through our strong economic plan has prevented that from occurring. And it is true that, of course, a 25 basis point increase in the cash rate, of course, for those who will be paying more, that will be harder. And we understand that. That's why tax reduction has been a key objective of our government and is ongoing. That is why supporting businesses who themselves face higher rates now as a result of this have been supported with increased tax deductions in the most recent budget and ongoing support. It is all being about having a strong economic plan that understands the global environment in which we're operating. And I've said all the way through this campaign, whether it's the strong pressures on interest rates, which we're seeing around the world from the extraordinary low settings that we've had, the strong pressures on inflation that are occurring all around the world, war in Ukraine, of course the impacts on global supply chains caused by the pandemic and the continued lockdowns and shutdowns, particularly of what we're seeing in China. That will all continue. The stresses and challenges we face economically continue into the future. So the choice that Australians face is, as you see the bank make that decision today, who do you want to rely on to ensure that we can minimise the impact of these pressures on your household budget, on your business? A government that has shown the strength with a strong economic plan to take us through this pandemic, or an untested and untried Labor opposition that we know can't manage money and that we know doesn't have an economic plan, and we're less than 3 weeks away from the election. And a leader of the opposition, a leader of the Labor Party, who only 3 weeks ago didn't even know what the cash rate was and now thinks he's better able to manage it. From our side, what we've done is have a clear economic plan which we believe has shielded Australia. And I think the economic evidence points that out, and the statement by the Reserve Bank Governor today reinforces the strength of the Australian economy under that plan.